Is that a new picture frame in the background? Or is that a pirate ship? I just noticed that. Nice. Is that a schooner or what? It's hard to tell on these cameras, but oh, you can't hear me either. This is. I just realized you can't hear me either, so that's even better. But I was like, it's.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but my wife got it for me for Father's Day.
Did you find it like a yard sale, like around your?
It's like vintage and it's like painted on wood. It's pretty sweet.
Oh man, I can't wait to see it in person. It's hard to tell over these cameras.
I'm going to be spending a lot more time in here with you lot because I love it in here. I fucking love it!
This was insane. There's some property around me that got bought a year ago for like, I don't know, $500,000, $600,000, was relisted 9 months later for $1.6 million. 3 weeks after that was cut down to $900,000. I was like, what? I mean, absolutely wild. Why you would list for 1.6 and then 3 weeks later cut to 900? Like,
it's all these psychological biases, right? And anchoring and everything. I wish I wasn't this way, but nothing pisses me off more than when I look at the housing pricing history, or somebody bought a house and in less than a year they've done nothing, no renovations, whatever, and then they list for an astronomically higher price. Now I shouldn't have that anchoring bias, and the market dictates what somebody willing to buy it for. But nothing pisses me off more than they've done no value exchange and then they just want a higher price.
Yeah.
So
a couple lots around me that are doing that right now, and I'm waiting for them to come back down to earth. But yeah, I think by the way, so right, I use sort of two extremes of how big the mortgage could be versus how small it could be. Like there's that 50-50 too, which is like, okay, take half the money in bonds, halvesies, right? And you go, okay, am I if I do 500,000 as cash collateral to get another 500,000 of Treasury futures, like, am I actually really running a big risk? I mean, the amount of the outsized move you would need to see in bonds at that point would be so astronomical for you to eat through that exposure. That's probably a risk I'm willing to take.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it. I also want to come back to your 10 units, 10 stocks, whatever. And if we're allowed privates, just for funsies, I'm going Eldridge Industries. Like, Todd Bowley's never taken our money, but man, it would be fun to invest alongside them and just be buying sports teams and just random shit here and there that are just like exciting.
Think about sports teams.
Yeah,
I did. I guess I did keep it in my head limited to things I actually could get investments in, right?
Yeah,
but sports teams is a fun one.
Well, you could probably get access via Redbird, and I'm gonna probably get the name wrong, but like, was it like Aptos or whatever that buys the secondary? They buy minority interests. So I mean, you could get access, but like, I just think about what Todd Bowley's doing at Eldridge and like how he owns multiple sports teams and multiple geographies and just, buys really interesting shit. And like, that excites me on that private side. Related to that though, I was listening to a podcast the other day about the PE firm that bought Breitling, and I should rewind this so I don't spew false information. But one thing that caught my attention was they said that the difference between the UK and the US in the luxury watch market, and they define luxury as anything over $5,000, is that the US market's 5 times the size of the UK market, but is only buying like 20% of luxury watches that the UK market is. And I thought that was an outrageous kind of like number of statistics. So I should probably go back and re-listen to that. But I'm pretty sure that's what they said.
All right, Jason, you have a choice of putting your money, locking it up in T-bills for a decade, or a diversified luxury watch collection.
So what they talked about in the podcast too, which you and I agree with, is like they found that the people that own luxury watches also own an Apple Watch. So it's a yes and scenario because they treat luxury watches like male jewelry now, not as in the functionality of the watch, because they can get much better functionality out of an Apple Watch. If we're going on the dip in prices and everything, that's a T-bills versus, oh man, That's tough. I mean, I would want to be a douche and go, I'll take my my yield off of Teals and I'll buy luxury watches. So like that's that's the way I do. What would you do in that scenario? I think I know what you do, but maybe not.
So I think of T-bills as like being at least historically in the US, a very coarse inflation hedge. People always think, oh, nominal bonds are an inflation hedge, but historically, the way the Fed has reacted and the way you can roll your T-bills, they've actually been a pretty decent way of maintaining your purchasing power parity. Everyone always talks about, oh, the US dollar is down so much over the last 100 years. No, you don't ever just hold dollars. Like you would put them at very least in the risk-free asset T-bills, and you've maintained your purchasing power. So from that perspective, I go, okay, do I think, how diversified could I get with, I don't know, let's say you choose 10 watches. Do I think I can choose 10 watches that are going to maintain, not just maintain, but like maintain with inflation over the next decade? That's tough. That's tough, right? You start to say, okay, I could probably pick a couple classic looking things. I'd actually probably want to not buy anything currently out.
All right.
I'd want to buy stuff that's already classic. So my thinking here goes back to the conversation we had about art, which is if you buy a Monet, you actually don't expect a very high return on a Monet at this point because it's a well-established artist. You might expect 2 or 3% per year versus there's a much greater risk premium if you buy a modern artist.
Yep.
And sort of as you walk your way back, the more established an artist is, the less risky the purchase, the lower the expected return. I think I would probably do the same thing with a watch, which is like I would try to look for very well-defined classics that have been classics for 10 or 15 years. Like, as a very maybe easy example, if I was going to have to go like Rolex, like a Rolex Hulk. I'm not sure a Rolex Hulk like that maybe that would be a little bit more extreme, but like Patek, you could buy a couple of like in that range of like, there are some Pateks that I just don't think are going to be, that'll maintain their status for the next decade. So that's the way I would think about approaching it. But again, like my passion for watches, I'd have to really do some research as to like what I think are existing classics that'll stay classics.
Okay, whenever I hear your beloved Breitling, it always just makes me think of Rich Homie Quan, and he's like that custom Breitling make you feel some type of way.
First of all, I didn't even bring up Breitling.
I know. I just was like,
you keep bringing it up.
Breitling marinades, but I know your love of Breitling.
But my love of Breitling. My favorite watch that I own is a Breitling, but it's a vintage Breitling from 1992. That just like no one. I like it because it's got such a classic watch look. I can dress it up. I can dress it down. No one knows what it is. It's small. It's not showy. I just love like the very old vintage look of it. It just so happens it is a Breitling.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Aesthetically, you and I tend to like Breitling, IWC, Panerai, like the much more simple watches. But like I think you have a great point about especially the Rolex that get like really hot, whether it's a Hulk or a Pepsi or whatever. Like that wouldn't make me nervous. It would be hard in this scenario. I'd probably want to go all Pateks, like because they seem to hold their value more than anything else. But at the same time, like because like the Rolexes, you and I have talked about before, there used to be, and it probably still is, an antique shop on Newbury Street in Boston where I used to buy like vintage Rolexes, and I used to have like stuff like that. I want to say it was like 1940s Afghan Air Force Rolex, but I would get it for like a few $100. So that's why you're saying like Rolex is producing such large quantities that it would make me nervous buying Rolexes. And like you said, some of those Pateks might come down in value, but I might buy 10 Pateks and like,
by the way,
and roll with that.
Here's something we didn't talk about. Are you getting it gray market?
Yeah,
because that's a very different price, right? If you said, okay, Corey, you can buy a Rolex sub from a dealer, I'd be like, all right, you want to? I know now. I'm going to sell a gray market. Great, I got it 60% off. 50% off. Exactly. So like that, there's a big premium built in there. If I have to buy them gray market, like I sort of think like to your point there. I think the Pepsi is classic, but like a Rolex sub, they're making a lot. And is someone gonna in 10 years want a 2023 Rolex sub? Is there anything special about a 2023 Rolex sub? No, you know?
Yeah. And like we said, the volume that producing. But I want to come back to, you brought up earlier zero coupon bonds. And that made me think about Buffett again. And for those that don't know, Buffett and Ted Saidi's had this great bet about hedge funds and the broad market back in the around